Well, thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to be focused on the topic of visualizing your resource utilization and capacity with Project Online and Power BI. It's one of our last webinars of the year. We do have a couple of upcoming events to make you aware of. We do have one more webinar in June 25th. It's focused on a topic that we got a lot of feedback on, that a lot of folks were looking for information on, and how to go about managing your waterfall and your agile projects using Project Online and Azure DevOps, which is Microsoft's latest cloud-based version of its Visual Studio product. We're seeing a lot of interplay between the dev world and the PPM world. So we're going to go through some good practices, show you some examples of some different tools and techniques to use. That'll be held on Tuesday, June 25th. Here's a registration link. We do have an in-person event coming up, Project Online Roadshow, where you'll be able to go hands-on with some of the technology and learn a lot about topics like Agile and deployment and digital transformation. It's a half-day session. This one's going to be hosted in sunny Minneapolis on Wednesday, July 24th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. If you're interested in attending, we will be doing a set of roadshows in the fall and winter in several other cities. We're just kicking it off this summer with an event in Minneapolis. All the webinars we do present are available on our Vimeo page. If you go to vimeo.com/showcase and 528-8659, you'll go to the Fragility webinar series. You'll be able to access all of these videos we've been doing over the last 18 months. Agenda-wise, we'll do some quick introductions to who is Fragility, for those of you who don't know us. We'll hop right into our key topic today, which is all about resource management and capacity planning. We're going to walk you through what some of the business challenges we're seeing from clients are today, and talk about some of the tools that are available in the Microsoft suite between Project Online and Power BI to help you visualize this data and make better business decisions. We're going to demonstrate some of this technology, as we always like to do, to show you kind of real-world scenarios, what's possible, and then we'll give you some good practices in terms of how you can go about implementing some of this technology in your environment, answer any questions. So if you want to hold those to the end, we'll take those right towards the end of our session today. A little bit about Fragility. We are a management and technology consulting firm based in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Specialists in the PPM suite. People generally come to us when they first and foremost can't easily explain what's going on across their entire project portfolio. They often don't know what resources are working on what work, and they often have a really hard time getting consistent reports and metrics to make project-based decisions. Whether this is relevant to your organization or not, sometimes you're looking for a little bit of a help, a little kickstart, and a lot of organizations are looking to use the Microsoft tools to achieve these things. They have the investment in Microsoft tools, Office 365, Project, SharePoint Online, Power BI. How do you get the most out of those tools? They tend to leverage Fragility for a lot of this. Additionally, we do run a LinkedIn group called the Project and Planner User Group. If you go to LinkedIn and look that up on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see I think we've got about 52,000 members of that group today, and that's been actually in place for several years. So we really do believe in having a community of users that can work together. But let's talk a little bit about the business problem. If we said, hey, how many of you folks out there have a challenge with resource management? Pretty sure that 98% of the hands in the room would go up. The real business problem as we see it is there's a direct conflict between the folks on the left and the folks on the right. If you think about it, the folks that own projects, what are they looking for? They're making an investment, they're giving money, they're giving time. They want results, and they don't really care about what it's going to take to get those results. They're actually making the investment to get those results. On the right side, you have the managers, and these are the people that manage people, your functional or resource managers. These are the folks that really have to go about managing the people and the resources that are going to be assigned to deliver on the scope, schedule, budget on the left. So project owners, they come to the table with a business case. They come to the table with the all-important dollar signs. They often have requests for very specific people that they hope are going to be able to actually add value and deliver on the results in their organization. They're very results-oriented. They want the end product. They want to get the bang for the buck and the return on investment, and they're often very project-based. They think in terms of, hey, what am I going to get out of this? When is the project actually going to be delivered? On the right side, we have our functional managers. They manage people, they manage utilization, they're managing skill sets, they're hiring and training and retaining talent. They're concerned really about the people management side of this whole thing. So if you look across it, the key that we have, and the one big challenge, is we never have enough people. We have lots and lots of work. We have lots of projects. We have lots of stakeholders on the left looking for results, and lots of functional managers on the right saying, hey, I may not have the people to support that. And key is there's very little internal data and systems to support this discussion. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of this is how organizations can go about leveraging some of the Microsoft technology to address this key business challenge. When we start to think about organizations and how they're structured today, in the past, up until the 70s and 80s, organizations were structured functionally on the left. we had line managers, and those were people that managed lines or individuals that had specific functions in an organization. In the 90s, we fell in love with project-based work in the far right. So we had project-based organizations where we had project teams and people were aligned with those project teams and they moved around. It was really hard to manage from a skills perspective and actually career growth. In the middle is where we live today in a matrix world, where we have a combination of line management. People may work for HR or finance. They have project managers that are leveraging them for a certain percentage of their time, and they only have a certain amount of time to leverage across these projects. Likewise, we have IT resources that act in the same way. They may be app developers that are being borrowed out for a finance or a human resources project, and they have different project managers in different parts of the organization. So the organizational structure will call to some of these challenges and also drive how we go about addressing these challenges today. And some of these challenges, just summarized, is the first one, the big one as we mentioned, resources that are being used on projects are typically not owned by the project team. In fact, the project manager may be working with a lot of these people for the very first time. These people are working on multiple projects for different masters at the same time, which is a really big challenge because each of those folks that has an investment or a stakeholder may have a different level of expectation in terms of communication, structure, strategy, level of importance. Everything is a top priority project for that executive. Also, these resources have lots of non-project work. They have competing priorities that have nothing to do with projects. They still need to get their day jobs done. And that's what's really pushing people to become over-allocated or being over-allocated in the first place is they have too much work that's project and non-project related. How do I get a view into all that? Each project, importantly, could be managed and approached very differently, which plays into the next one, different methodologies. A lot of organizations are adapting Agile or Scrum or Kanban. Other ones are doing Waterfall, and other ones are doing a combination of those, Scrumfall. So we start to see that the methodology can also drive how people are going to work. And if people aren't necessarily fully trained or they're working on different methodologies, it can get a little bit confusing for them. How do we make it easy? A lot of times we find there's no centralized reporting mechanism except for a timesheet that goes into your finance system for billing and accounting. That timesheet ties maybe at a project level. It doesn't tell you specifically what activities people are working on, and more importantly, when they're going to be done and when they're going to free up. So a lot of that is kept in spreadsheets and in executives' or managers' minds. And finally, we're finding that the reporting behind all of this is in lots of different places. It's often disjointed. We may get a timesheet report. We have to merge that together with a project status report, merge that together with a resource manager's report. So these are some of the key challenges we see relating to how people work, who they work on, what they work on, and the kind of reporting we do today. So what really becomes important, we find in most of the organizations we work with, is capacity planning. Capacity planning is absolutely critical. What is capacity planning? It's a combination of a tool, process, and a procedure to help you determine the resources that are going to be needed to meet your current needs and the future workload demand within and across your organization. This can be done enterprise-wide, group-wide, just team-wide. It's hard to get a handle on what the capacity is and what the actual utilization is today. What capacity planning does require is two key things. We have to know our inventory. What are people working on today in a project and non-project way, and how much work do they have there? Additionally, what's the forecast going forward for tomorrow? How much work do we have for these people going forward? The goal here is to understand how many resources we're going to need, of what kinds, with what kind of skills, when we're going to need them, and when we will need them to meet the demands of the business. This is really important because, again, we're going to have different masters and different stakeholders that are going to have demands for when things are going to be delivered. If we can't have a really good feel for what our capacity is, we're not going to be able to commit to things. And we may commit without really knowing who can work on what. And without that, we don't know if we can actually deliver. And a lot of organizations fall behind. They go over schedule, they go over budget, they're definitely over resourced or under resourced because they don't necessarily have a good plan for capacity planning. So really getting a handle on your capacity is really step one in doing any kind of resource utilization, and visualization of the data drives that. So there are tools available within the Microsoft suite of products that can help you address this. At the top, we have Project Online, and Project Online is Microsoft's project portfolio management solution, which most of you are familiar with, that can be deployed to support different kinds of resource management processes. The first of those is that capacity planning. So one of the first things we'll show you in our demonstration is how you can go in and look at the capacity of a team, what people are working on, and what's the demand behind that. Demand management also ties into capacity planning, and that's going to be not only what's my capacity today, what's the demand coming in, what does tomorrow look like in terms of the incoming workload or the pipeline for potential work. I need to have a mechanism, whether it's a process, a tool, or a combination, to do what we call our resource selection and optimization to determine who are the right resources with the right skills to make the right business decisions to deliver on the projects that I have so I can commit on those to the business. And finally, I have to do some kind of work and utilization tracking to track what people are working on day to day, whether it's a timesheet in PPM, a timesheet somewhere else, a spreadsheet, however you're doing it. You have to be able to track what people are working on so you have a full picture of everybody's workday. Finally, down at the bottom, we have a series of analytics tools driven by Power BI. And this is where we're able to actually tap into the data that's available in Project Online and potentially in other applications and systems to make business decisions. So we're looking at a combination of Project Online on the PPM side and Power BI. What's really important is how you set this up and what your workflow looks like around it. And the most important part of this, and we'll state this a couple times in our presentation today, is establishing that workflow. Before we can start our workflow around resource management, we need to establish something called our resource pool. And we're going to set up a global enterprise resource pool within our PPM tool, within Project Online. That's where we're going to be setting up our resources. We're going to be setting up things like maximum capacity. We're going to be setting up different groups and roles. And we're going to set up the rules behind that, who has access to request and get to what information and what resources. Establishment of that resource pool is the most important part of Project Online, especially if you're going to do resource management. A lot of organizations skip over that. They just set up a resource pool, flow a bunch of resources in there, and they wonder why they don't have good visibility into the capacity and utilization. How you set that resource pool up really drives everything around your process. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at your project portfolio management workflow. You may have a life cycle that looks something like this. We have a creation phase where ideas come in. They get initially reviewed by the business. They get a completed request, maybe it gets suspended or canceled, so we have that creation or initiation phase where we do our upfront demand. When it comes to demand management, what we want to do is get a work request in based off of how many resources I'm going to need at an FTE level by role. So this is the resource management component of it. And then we want to get estimates that are provided by either the requester or the manager in that process. So we have to capture what that forecasted workload is going to be for potential resources that may do the work. As we move into the selection phase, that's where we're going to review our request. We go through our formal portfolio analysis and selection. We want to make sure our project aligns with our business strategies and our business goals. And we're going to determine whether we're going to do it or not. What's really important in that do it or not is really the resource management components of that. So this is where we're going to have specific groups or portfolios of projects. Managers are going to go in on a regular basis and review the work types, the requests for different kinds of resources, look at the prioritization and the existing demand around those resources. So we need the ability to look at that information, capture it and look at it. We want the ability to do what we call what-if scenarios, so we can go in and understand if we have the right resources or do we have not enough resources in a certain category. And we want to be able to analyze the total work by role so we can look at resources and types. Do I have shortfalls or do I have deficits in certain kind of resources? Then we want to try out different solutions without impacting the actual work going on in our portfolio. We want to say, what if I brought 3 business analysts in from the outside, or what if I shifted some work around? So we need some tools and some analytics to do that. Finally, we want to make some kind of a go-forward decision that says, here are the resources we're going to commit, here are the roles, here's the workload, let's go forward and now start planning out our detailed work plans and assign our resources and our projects. That's where we're making the commitment to the actual project. When we go into the planning phase, that's when we've got our business case, we're building out our schedule, our scope, our detailed estimates for the actual planning behind the project that's been approved. And this is where we're going to actually start working with our project managers. Sometimes project managers get involved now, sometimes a little earlier in the life cycle, but project managers are going to give you a go forward on the project. They get that go forward. You're going to work with a resource manager or a functional manager to substitute the actual resources for the forecasted resources we had. So now we're going to put Jim on a project where before we knew we had 3 business analysts, Jim being one of them. Now we start allocating the actual work. So Jim gets assigned work on projects. He's got existing project work, non-project activities, and he's going to be able to go in and update his work through his or her timesheet. And this is also where resources are going to be notified of these commitments. They get an email, they get in a status meeting, they get in a kickoff meeting. You're going to be able to start updating their progress in the next phase. And finally, we get to the manage phase. And this is where we're delivering on the project. Whether it's waterfall or agile, the methodology doesn't really matter. It's project delivery time. And that's where we're going to have a certain set of steps around resources. Work is going to be performed, so we're going to get actuals updated against our budget. We assign Jim 40 hours. He's supposed to be done on Friday. He comes in and says, I'm going to be done on Friday. I can get it done in 20 hours. Good news. He's got extra availability during that period. Or Jim may come back and say, you know what? I can't finish till next Friday, and I need another 40 hours. That may cause a resource bottleneck or a constraint that I want to work with the resource manager on. I need to be able to understand that and understand if I have allocation challenges with the actual assigned work, how's the performance going. So this is where actually the rubber meets the road in the delivery of people and projects happens. This is where we really want to have our performance dashboards that are going to give us a real-time or near real-time look into what's going on across our projects and our portfolio, be able to drill in and drill out of that data. So if you think about establishing that workflow and determining within each of those workflow steps what needs to be done around a resource management lifecycle, it's really important that you do that. And then we can talk about the ways to automate that, or do parts of this have to be manual, or can we use parts of the tool to do it in a combination of those. That workflow is absolutely critical, and that comes along with how you're designing your PPM application, because Project Online works in a very specific way, and it supports some of these areas with great flexibility and other ones not so much. So you really want to understand that and try to build your process and your workflow along with the system. Let's show you a little bit about the tools and how they can operate. I'm going to give you a demonstration here. Hopping into Project Online. So now I'm in Project Web App. I'm in my Project Online homepage. I'm going to be able to see my lifecycle workflow phases. So as a project manager or a team member, I can come in and understand what each lifecycle phase means. That's not really important to me right now. From a resource tracking and utilization perspective, I'm going to come over here. Maybe I'm in the submission phase. I'm submitting a project idea. I would get submission project requests, and resource requests can come in here too. Then when I get into selection, that's where I'm going to start doing my resource utilization. And this is where I'm going to come to my resource center, and this is a view into my resource pool. It's really important that the resource pool be set up to reflect how you organize, track, and manage your resources. For instance, maybe you work in engineering teams, or maybe you work by portfolio, or maybe you work by role, or you want to organize your resource into a program, and you want to look at what resources you have across a program, or maybe by skill, or maybe it's going to be, again, by portfolio. So maybe I have very specific portfolios with specific types of resources. But for the sake of our demonstration today, I'm going to log in and pretend I'm a manager of a team of product engineers. I'm going to be able to go in and select my team of product engineers, and within that subset, you'll see I have named resources like Aaron, Erwin, and Josh. Then I've got a role, a generic resource called a product engineer. So when I get those requests, when people are submitting requests for resources, they're not going to request Aaron or Joe. What they're going to do is they're going to request the product engineer, and then I as a manager can go in and look at my resource demand and capacity and requests. How do I do that? I group my resources in this way. I'm going to be able to go in and first and foremost look at all the requests I have coming into my queue. So as a resource manager, I can come in and look at the requests I have for product engineers, what projects are requesting them, how many hours they're requesting them on, when they're requesting them, and even look at that over a time phase mechanism. So I can start to see the hours forecasted out, how many product engineers I'm going to need on each project, should it be committed, and the requests coming in. So it's a nice way to look at the queue of all the resource requests that are coming in. I can then go to my capacity planning, and as a resource manager, I'm going to be able to get in a snapshot of my utilization. So if I just wanted to take a look at all of those incoming requests, I'm going to go to capacity engagement heat map, and this is just going to show me the discrepancy between the committed capacity for the resources I have and the engagements that are coming in or the requests for new ones. So I can very quickly see from a day-to-day management perspective, if I'm looking at my engineers and I want someone requested Patrick on a project for the month of February and March, I can very quickly say I've got more requests than he has availability because he's showing up in red. Likewise, I may look at Erwin or Aaron, so as I'm doing my kind of rolling wave planning here, I can drill into that and say, well, what's this request here? Show me more about what you're looking for on this maintenance request, and just highlight that. And all the requests are going to show up and all the metadata about them. Who requested it? What's the project? When was it requested? It's a really nice view into this information, and this is built into Project Online today. What I can then do is go in and look at my utilization, and this is going to show me my resource utilization over time. So if I wanted to just say, show me my current workload and my utilization, and do I have certain periods where I have more or less work for certain resources? So I look at the month of May, and someone comes and says, hey, I'd really like to have Tom Henry in the month of May. You can confidently say that's probably a bad idea because he has 1,000 hours of work in May. But you know what? I can give you Roberto, or it looks like Aaron has availability, or Erwin has availability during this month as well. But once I load in there that unfulfilled demand, or all those requests that are coming in, that role called a product engineer, then I see periods where I'm going to have more work than people. So I can confidently say, hey, based on my current forecasted work, October is a fine month. But if I look at it, I'm going to have some resource bottlenecks or challenges in the month of May. And I'm going to have to resolve those through my portfolio management, which is one of the key tools that's built in. So these are some great views that are built into Project Online, as well as I can go and look at remaining availability. So I want to know who's available in the month of October. I can simply say remaining availability, and then what I can do is I can start removing resources that are overbooked, so that I can say which of my resources are going to have the most or the least availability over a period of time. And then by doing this, in the month of October, here are the people with the greatest availability right now. So there's some built-in views into Project Online that can really help us make better business decisions and get access to all the data. And by the way, to do my rolling wave planning, I can come in here and I can start to look at my breakdown maybe by resource and then by project. So I can group my information in a reasonable way. So let's look at it by resource name and then by project, which is a pretty reasonable way to do it. And the idea is I have a full look at all of our resources work. So if I look at Aaron, he has maintenance work. He has project work, so he's working on an agile project here, and he also may have waterfall work or emergency projects that are coming up as well. I get a full look in that resource, everything he or she is working on over that period of time. So it's a great way to capture all that information and make really good business decisions. So these are some pre-built views in Project Online that can help you visualize the data about your resources. But what if I'm in that point where I get all these project requests in, and I really want to understand, what projects should and shouldn't I do? And this is where I'm going to go out to the portfolio analysis component of the tool. The portfolio analysis, and this is kind of like a little hidden gem in Project Online, lets you go in and actually set up different portfolios. And those portfolios may be made up of different potential projects you're considering. It could be all the potential projects in my pipeline. It could be the potential projects within a program. It could be active projects and then the 4 emergency projects as they came in. And what I can do is I can run a series of models based off of that. I can prioritize the projects in my portfolio. So I can score each project against our business drivers to make sure we have the highest ranked projects at the top of the list. The system will actually help us prioritize our projects based off of our business drivers, say what's most and least important to the organization. So when we start to line up our resources, we know what we're looking at and why. And then we have 2 options here. We can analyze our budgets, but what we're going to do for today is really analyze our resource constraints. So I'm going to make the assumption that we've determined what our budget is going to be for our projects, how much money we have for the portfolio. We've determined that. We know what projects we can do. And then what we're going to do is hop to this button called Analyze Resources. This part of the tool, think of this really as a nice sandbox. And the sandbox is going to help you run different scenarios and models based off of your resource constraints. So if every project request and every work request is coming into the system, we can put them into the portfolio, we can score them against business drivers, which is something that's important, and we can see top to bottom what our most and highest and lowest priority projects are. But then what the system's going to do, which is really nice, it's going to pull all those resource requests that came in, and it's going to turn those into an availability matrix. And it's going to say, well, you've got some demand up here for different types of resources. You can see we have accountants, analysts. It's going to give us a summary of the demand we have, or the total resources we're going to need over time for each role. So if I had requests starting in October for developers, that's going to go and peak in April and May and June, it's going to aggregate that. All those were coming in through those resource requests. Now I can see them all in one place. Importantly, what the system's going to do, it's going to show us our highest and lowest priority projects, but based on our current capacity, which we've set up in that resource pool, here's some projects we can't do, not selected, because we're short resources. For instance, on the health assessment project, we're short testers during the first quarter. We're short trainers for 2 quarters. So how do I resolve that? I get more testers and trainers, or I take some of the projects that already have testers and trainers and I move them around. Maybe I deprioritize those, or I shift the timelines on those. So this is going to give us visibility. It's going to help us visualize the data and understand what resources we're lacking if we want to do some of these projects and the priority of each of those investments. So the nice thing about this is we can go in and run a series of models. This is a resource constrained model. It's saying I only have a finite number of resources. What if I took a couple of these projects and moved them out? So I'll take 2 of the projects I have that are kind of medium priority, and I'll move those out, and you'll see the dates will slip, and I really want to do this health assessment project. What if I delayed that one until January? So given the same resources, if I move out 3 of these projects, I delay them, will that allow me to actually deliver on an additional project or 2? And good news. So by delaying those 2 projects, I actually pulled 2 other projects in because I have the capacity to do it over that time frame. It's looking back at those resource requests and the total capacity you set it up in the system. The other option would be, well, great, that doesn't solve my problem. I still have this health assessment project. I haven't solved that. What if I went in and I moved projects in and out? So I can force projects in and out for compliance or pet project reasons, move them in and out. Or I can just say, you know what if I just came up with the easy button and I brought in 3 people from the outside? I'm going to plug in the number 3 into hire resources. And now based on bringing 3 people in from the outside, can I now do these projects? And good news, because I just brought 3 people in, I've added to my workload. I haven't shifted the schedule, but now I can do that software development project and the health assessment project that Fran wants. So it lets us run a what-if scenario and analyze this information, always go back to the details, and by the way, get a report that shows us, who we should bring in if we wanted to meet these resource requirements that we just modeled out. We're going to need testers and trainers on these projects, starting in these dates, with a certain number of hours. And if I had put in hourly rates, it would calculate what the total additional cost for each project would be, so I can have a really good educated discussion on this. And these are some great tools we can use to really visualize the portfolio and run different models based on our resource constraints. So good news, we've determined the projects we can do. We're getting about 95% value from the portfolio. We're investing in the right projects. What do we do now? Now we're executing on the project. We have a schedule, we have a SharePoint site, people are tracking their work and their time. What does all that look like, and how do I visualize that information? Well, from a team member perspective, team members are going to obviously be able to get in and look at all their tasks in one place. They're going to have a My Task list or a timesheet. It's going to show them all of their project-based work. They're going to see any non-project activities all in one place. And they're going to be able to actually filter down and look at what's coming up next, what's in this period, show me all my non-project activities, or they'll have a formal timesheet where it'll all come together for formal time submission. So the time is all being tracked in a single mechanism in Project Web App. But now the project manager needs a way to go in there and understand what's going on and do better resource capacity planning in alignment with the resource manager. And this is where we're going to be hopping over into some of our dashboards. This is where we're going to be relying on Power BI. Power BI is a great analytics tool, so we're going to go into Power BI and start looking at some different reports and dashboards that may be useful, pulling on this data. The first of those is a demand report. And what this report is going to show us is resource demand. It's going to show us, for a certain subset of our resources, what's our capacity, our red line, as established in Project Online, and what's the demand within that window. So what I can do is I can go in and say, I'm actually just worried about the demand for specific people, folks that are requesting Claire and David. So as Claire and David's manager, I can get in here and say, their capacity is a certain number of hours month over month. It looks like they're going to be over capacity for a couple of weeks during the month of January or February. And I can look at the date range in different ways. I can move the bar and just look at a shorter date range, or slide that out and look at weeks or days or months and start to really focus on the challenging work periods, certain days, and then down at the bottom I have all the data. So for Claire, I can see the capacity and the demand, where I have any gaps. Here I have more demand than capacity, and which projects, importantly, are driving that capacity and demand. Same thing for Dave. And then I can drill into the data if I want, and I get all the data that's coming from Project Online. So we're feeding the data from Project Online. We're building a really logical data model behind it, and then we're able to visualize the data through some of these reports. So for a resource manager, between what's in Project Online, between that resource queue, doing some of the portfolio management, and then being able to actually go in and do some of this modeling and reporting in Power BI, it's going to give us the data we need to make smart business decisions. So really being able to get data out. Some other really useful reports here. I'm going to hop into some of these here. So let's go to one. Here's some Microsoft reports. Again, some more reports built off data models. And now we have a portfolio view. And maybe as a resource manager, again, I want to be able to share, what's the availability of my pool of resources. So I may focus just on my IT resources in this case, a specific group or a specific team. And now I can see, not just for individuals, but for sprint teams, if I'm working in Agile or sprint teams, what's the total capacity or availability of those resources. So if somebody wants to take sprint team A, put them on a new project that's coming up in the month of May, I can tell them confidently it's probably not going to happen, because they're already overbooked, and I'm going to be able to see what projects they're working on right from here. So what I can do is I can highlight different components of this, and my reports are going to change, Or again, if I just want to focus on the negatively available resources that I have in my pool, these are my 3 or 4 resources that are currently challenged. So now I can work with Robin, Zeno, Pavel, and Uzi and really focus on the problems here. Why are you overbooked? Let's take a look into those tasks before we get to the month of April or May. So it's really a nice availability, the ability to go in and look at resource availability. We can start to drill into specific resources and start to look at, do I have certain groups like my IT resources that are always overbooked? Who are they? What are they working on? Maybe I want to look at details on my resources. I want to see for a resource like Tom. Tom's always overbooked. Why is that? Well, it looks like he's an external resource, so he's contracted. He costs us $100 an hour, so he's expensive. So in a year, he's costing us a lot of money. How much work is he doing? What's his actual cost? Why is he overallocated? And what work do I have him assigned to? And if I start looking at, do I have projects here where it doesn't make sense to have Tom work on? Maybe I should assign an internal resource like this construction project. If I move them off of that, maybe I can make him less overallocated, right? And then I can start to look at other resources. Well, tell me a little bit about some other resources I have. Let's look at Sunny or Jim. And I can simply go in and select those resources, the resource or resources, and then I get a view and say, well, Sunny has the same skills. He's a little bit less expensive. He's not as overbooked. Maybe I should move some of the work over to him if he plays the same role. So a resource manager has one place to get access to all the data. Remember, the source of this is Project Online. Project Online needs to be configured and set up properly with all the information, but once it is, Power BI becomes a great enabling or visualizing tool. Finally, if you want to look at a demand forecast, a visual that shows me, let's look at the demand coming in for all of our IT projects over the next couple months. We have 800 hours of demand, and that's our max demand point. So we can see our peak periods of November and March, and then we can drill into that so we can clearly communicate, hey, we have demand peaks here we want to meet. We may need to surge some resources in. Maybe we need 1 FTE or 2 FTEs to add during these months to do the projects. So there's some great resource views here, as well as some specific resource assignment views that are going to help us make decisions. And as we go through the life cycle of a project, we're going to want more analytics, or day-to-day reporting. And that's where there's some other dashboards. So I'm going to show you some resource availability reports here. So as a resource manager, again, I may want to go in and take a look and say, show me all my over-allocated named resources with a specific role. I can drill into that. Or if I want to go in and look at resource workload. Let's take a look at people within IT that are working on specific projects, and then I can see all of their capacity and assignments and utilization all in one place. Finally, we do have some additional reports here that are going to help you make business decisions on your resources as we look to forecast out. Maybe we want to look at the resource portfolio, thinking about resources in portfolios and different roles. Maybe I want to focus mainly on my testers and trainers and my product engineers. Let's take a look at testers and trainers. And if we look at them, which projects are consuming the most hours for testers and trainers? Let's focus on specific projects, or maybe just show me my testers. And then I can actually show the records behind this. I can show the data and drill down into the data that goes behind all of these reports. The nice thing about any of these reports is I can export them out, put them into a PDF, put them in a PowerPoint for a management presentation. It's not going the other way. It's based off of real data that's being managed in your Project Online system versus you putting an Excel spreadsheet together or a PowerPoint. So drive the data into the report, subscribe to the report, share it with lots of different people. And this is really the power of using a PPM platform and an analytics tool. And Microsoft was recently ranked by Gartner as upper right-hand quadrant, way upper right in the analytics quadrant because of the flexibility of tools like Power BI. So what we want to do is help you understand some of the visualizations that are available to help you make better resource-based decisions. What we're showing you today is all tools that are available through the Microsoft Office 365 Cloud today. So we're focused on Microsoft PPM or Project Online, Power BI as a conduit to the data that's in Project Online. Potentially, if you wanted, you can export that data into a data warehouse like a lot of clients have that lives in Azure, and you can do trending and analytics. You could even integrate it with your HR finance system data in Azure and then use Power BI as a layer on top of that. Potentially pulling in data from Azure DevOps or Dynamics as well. So think of it as really a holistic cloud solution or a platform that you can leverage as the organization grows. So these are a lot of tools that people already have in place today. It's really a matter of establishing that workflow, deploying properly, putting change management and adoption processes in place to drive use and adoption. Deployment. How do we get there? A lot of organizations come and say, I've got these tools. Do I just flip them on and start using it? Absolutely not. The best way to do it is to establish a really foundational resource management process while you're setting up PPM. We find a lot of organizations do this big process around resource management. They bring the consultants in, they have the binder, they sit down to design their PPM system and realize I can only automate about 70% of this. What you want to do is back up from that and align your process and the technology at the same time. You want to automate as much of that as you possibly can, understanding a lot of it is going to be discussions and people related, but align your system and design your system and your process simultaneously. We find those are much more successful when organizations are open to changing their process to meet some of the requirements of the tool. Otherwise, you may end up backing yourself into a process that can't be supported by any tool, and it's very hard to drive decision making and automation. The second key point here, you really want to determine what your workflow is going to be, even if you say, I don't have a resource management process at all. Establish some kind of a basic workflow, how you go through initiation, planning, controlling, management, and reporting as it relates to planning and managing your resources. Make it very, very basic from the beginning. Even if you have nothing, if you have a very complex one, maybe simplify it down to something that's probably more workable. You also want to, at the same time, develop and deliver a specific reporting strategy that's going to drive your decision making. We've got those stakeholders, the people that own the projects on the left, the people that own the resources on the right, the people that are doing the work kind of down in the middle, and also the project managers. They're going to be able to, and you want them really owning a part of the process. If they can't deliver on something because it's a resource challenge, you want them visualizing that data, sharing that visualization with management, and making a good business decision so they can do their proper risk management, deliver on time and on budget. So reporting ties into workflow, ties into your process. Design them all at the same time. If you're not doing that, you may want to back up and start over with this in mind. Importantly, a lot of organizations say, just drop those out-of-the-box reports in here and we'll go from there. Don't assume out-of-the-box meets any of your needs. You may have very unique workflow needs that a lot of organizations don't. One of the unique areas that most companies and government agencies you work with have is how they plan, manage, and determine what resources they're going to use. It's unique to your organization, unlike building a schedule or tracking work. That's a really there's some foundational templates that can be used. With reporting and workflow, that's really unique to you. So don't assume what comes out of the box with the tool is what's going to meet your needs. Also, we recommend you don't try to do too much too soon. The big acronym is crawl, walk, run these days. You can call it whatever you want, but don't try to jump in and do capacity planning, demand management, forecasting, portfolio management all at once. Start with really basic, what am I working on today, and what do I need to work on tomorrow? The minimum amount of data you need to get there. You don't want to suddenly overburden your managers with too much. They're going to back off and go back to the old system. They'll run parallel systems, shadow systems. Start with a really basic process and workflow. And we also recommend you consider doing this in a dual way, a dual approach. Deploy what you need, but also pilot what you want. So I need to have project requests coming in for different roles. I need to have schedules built with resources. I need to track time. That's great. But I also want to look out 18 months and do next year's resource forecasting and planning. Maybe deploy A, that first set, but pilot B as it relates to A, and tie these two processes together so they're all part of a common approach. So you've got today and you've got tomorrow, and you're setting the foundation for good practices now, but also future practices you're going to be expecting from your end users, so they don't think it's just about A. It's going to be about A and B at a certain point in time. Call that a pilot. You also want to involve those key business stakeholders. So they may be your resource and functional managers. They may be folks from human resources. They may be IT managers or business stakeholders. Involve them in your deployment from we really want to understand what's important to you. You don't want them necessarily designing the system. You want them telling you what information they want to make decisions. Then you can work on the system design, put it in front of them at different strategic points in the project, make sure it meets their needs from a reporting and tracking and day-to-day management perspective. You also, importantly, want to engage resources that have been there and done that. Don't bring somebody in who's never done resource capacity planning, but done a really basic project online deployment, and they'll figure it out. There's so many nuances to this, and so much that has to tie back to your unique process. You really need people that specialize in this domain, in this process area with Project Online. So if you can bring somebody in to help you with the deployment, it's always a better approach. As relates to that, Fragility does offer deployment and consulting services in this area, integration services, as well as a lot of the work around Power BI we discussed, as well as some pre-built reporting accelerators. As I mentioned before, we find that a lot of organizations don't use out of the box. They need very unique or customized reports to their needs. So these accelerators and the data warehouse can help jumpstart that process for reporting. They can give you a lead on that to get up and running quicker. They're not going to give you the solution. They're going to give you a foundation that becomes the solution. Anybody tells you these are the best solution reports, they don't really exist. They're just good practice reports that you can build upon. So hopefully this was informative to you. Before we answer any questions, we want to again restate that we are having another webinar on managing your waterfall and agile projects with Project Online and Azure DevOps, as well as a roadshow that's going to start our roadshow season in July in Minneapolis in a couple of weeks. So hopefully you can join us for that. So at this point, we're going to stop our recording and we're going to answer